Meanwhile, our economy is still heading south in a big way, very possibly towards another recession. So what has actually changed? Let's ask a tax cutter who thinks this bill is a big winner. Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, joins us now. Grover, wonderful to see you. Thanks for coming in. We just heard Judge Andrew Napolitano call this bill something put together by weak-kneed compromisers. Why is he wrong?
Well, it is a compromise. Republicans wanted to drop $6 trillion in spending from where Obama was taking us. That was the Paul Ryan budget. This is a $2.5 trillion restraint. It's not as much as the Republicans wanted, certainly not as much as I wanted. The advantage is that it's moving in the right direction, pulling back Obama's overspending.
But you go further than that. You've got a piece in the Daily Caller. You say it's a victory for Reagan Republicans. Why is this Reagan-esque?
Yeah. Well, because it sets two kinds of precedent. The first is there's no tax increase in this. In 1982 and in 1990, when the Republican and Democratic leaders all got together in a room and they came out, there were massive permanent tax increases and spending restraint that was fake. Okay. This time around,
let me just stop you there, because, of course, in 1983, we had very real tax rate cuts, cuts in the marginal tax rates that came down very significantly. So that was a compromise that led to real cuts. And you're suggesting, I assume, that the same is going to happen here.
Well, okay, 81 is when we passed the tax cuts.
Right.
They came into effect in 83. 82 was just tax increases.
Right.
It was just bad stuff in 82. So what happened is, they've always told us, oh, if you give us tax increases, we'll give you spending restraint. And like Lucy and Charlie Brown in the football, we got took.
Right.
This time around, the Republicans said tax increases are off the table. Matter of fact, all tax stuff is off the table. We'll do tax reform another time. Just focusing on spending restraint.
Well, hold on. Just a second, Grover, because we have some difference of opinion on that. Jay Carney, who was the White House spokesman, spoke to the issue of tax increases. I know you know what's coming. Let's just play the tape and get your reaction.
Sure.
The suggestion that it is impossible for the Joint Committee to raise tax revenue is simply not accurate. It's false. Or if they decide to limit the value of itemized deductions for high-income earners, as the President has called for, they can do that, and they would raise revenue through doing that.
Now, he talks about the Joint Committee. The Joint Committee is something that is listed. This is the bill that was just passed by the House. The Joint Committee is throughout this bill listed as a committee of Senate and House leaders that will decide issues about things like taxes. And Jay Carney say they'd have the power to raise taxes. You say no way.
No. They have the authority to recommend to the House and the Senate a particular piece of legislation. The House of Representatives and the Republican leaders there have already put themselves on record as saying we are not going to pass anything that has a tax increase in it. So Carney is right that the committee could recommend a tax increase, but the committee has no legal authority to do anything other than to ask the House and the Senate to vote on things. I worry about many things in life. This House of Representatives passing a tax increase is not one of them.
All right, what about tax reform, though? Doing something like Simpson Bowles suggested, for example, a lot of people have suggested bringing down the rates closer to kind of a Steve Forbes flat tax, and then getting rid of a lot of the deductions. Anybody talking about that? Any chance that that could be done?
Extremely unlikely for the following reason. The Democrats look at deductions and exclusions and credits and see cash to spend. Republicans look at those same deductions and exclusions and credits and see an opportunity to reduce rates. So while Republicans and Democrats both use the term tax reform, Democrats mean tax increases, Republicans mean revenue-neutral tax reform. I think it takes a different president to get this done. It's certainly not going to happen in the next year.
By the way, we're looking at a graphic of exactly how much the top 1% and the top 5% pay as a share of the overall income tax, and the top 5% pay about 60% of all the income tax revenue. I think the president's rhetoric, because of facts like this, has fallen flat, don't you?
Well, all during this process, when the Republicans were talking about spending less and Obama was talking about raising taxes, his popularity went to 40%. He's now losing to an unnamed Republican. His numbers have collapsed along with the economic numbers. That's why he had to sign something with real spending restraint and no tax increase, because he's extremely weak and he's hoping to get back standing up straight.
Right. And Grover, the whole overall rhetoric that the rich aren't paying their fair share, you continue to see that in the New York Times editorial against this deal today.
Yeah.
The rhetoric that, in fact, we are not taxed enough as a nation. I just don't see that going anywhere. Do you?
It doesn't, and one of the reasons is every American of whatever income knows perfectly well that politicians who want to raise taxes but promise only to mug the guy sitting to your left will eventually get to you. 16 days into Obama's presidency, 16 days into his presidency, he raised taxes on people who smoke cigarettes. The only American who smokes cigarettes and earns more than $250,000 a year is named Barack Obama. His first official act was to tax poor people.
Yeah. Now, we're going to be talking about this a little later, but there is still Obamacare, and there are a lot of taxes, that are attached to Obamacare. So we still have those taxes that they have to either be eliminated one by one, or Obamacare has to be eliminated in one fell swoop. Is there any chance that's going to happen before the election?
Before the election, no. The Democrats still run the Senate, and even if the Democrats get very scared, they're not going to be 60 votes to get rid of it, even if you got 3 or 4 of them panicked. And the president has the veto. He is not going to undo what he considers his greatest accomplishment in accumulating more power and money and wealth here in Washington, D.C., Obamacare.
Grover Norquist, who is the president of Americans for Tax Reform, and actually has had a lot to do with changing some of the rhetoric that we've heard in Washington about taxes. Grover, good to see you. Thank you very much for being here.